So this POCO phone has been rumored for a while and is now finally launched, so let's see how these phones stack up to the expectations and whether it is worth your money.
Clouds are stirring up the sky. I was always in denial of what I saw right in front of me. And every time I'm so damn lost to what I loved and what I lost. But let's get lost in love tonight.
So there are two variants of the POCO F5, the regular F5 5G as well as the F5 Pro, and POCO have sent me the F5 today for review, and this is not a sponsored post and I'll be sharing with you my honest and unbiased opinion about them. So the F5 comes in two models that you can buy today. There is a 8GB RAM model with 256GB of storage, as well as 12GB of RAMs with 256GB of storage, which is quite crazy to think about it since some of the laptops today still comes back with 8GB of RAM. Anyways, if you're interested in buying this phone, do check out my links in the description below. So the design of the F5 is actually very similar to the Redmi Note 12 Pro 5G that we recently looked at, and almost all of it resembles the Redmi with the only exception which is the camera bump. So with the typical POCO fashion, you're gonna get a plastic bag here which has a bit of a pearlescence effect to it, and the color that I have here is blue color, and the phone also comes in two additional colors which is white and black. So the bag here is also similar to Xiaomi fashion of branding, and you're gonna get the POCO 5G branding at the side here, and there's a 3-camera setup in front here which actually is quite huge compared to what we've seen on the Redmi. So the camera bump design is starting to go out of fashion, and we're now mostly getting camera cutouts thanks to the design from Samsung S series of phones. And this phone here is also a really lightweight phone, and it only comes in at 181 grams, and honestly it feels really light. Not many people like to carry heavy phones around, and as much as I like the 14 Pro Max weight, when you put it in your pocket it actually sacks down your pants, which is not so nice. So a lightweight phone is also a good thing. So button placement and ports are identical to the Redmi Note 12 Pro. So on the right side you're gonna get the volume rocker as well as the power button, which is also the fingerprint sensor. Very easy to access and it's quite accurate. At the top of the phone is a 3.5mm jack. Since the phone also is high-res audio certified, having that auxiliary port is a plus point. You're also going to get a dual speaker setup on this phone, one at the top, one at the bottom, and this time with Dolby Atmos, which is really immersive. So at the bottom here, you're also going to get a Type-C charging port which supports 67 watts fast charging, and also the SIM tray, which in this case also doesn't support expandable storage, which is quite sad. Similar to all Redmi and POCO devices, you're going to get a silicone case out of the box, so you don't have to buy them separately. However, with this camera cutout, I noticed that you don't get quite a high enough clearance with this plastic case, so you might want to change it, or you want to be careful when placing your phone down. So display wise, you're going to get the same screen here as the Redmi Note 12 Pro, and you're going to get exactly the same 6.67 inch Full HD Plus display with a resolution of 2400 by 1080p. So you're going to get a 1080 screen here with AMOLED display protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 5. And with that said, you're going to get pretty sharp pixel density here, and you're also going to get DCI P3 color gamut, and display is honestly quite beautiful. You're also going to get peak brightness of 1000 nits here versus the 900 nits with the Redmi, and again 1000 nits is good but not the best under extreme bright sunlight situation. So similarly here, you're also going to get a 120Hz display, which is not going to be selected as standard out of the box, so remember to turn it to 120Hz in the settings to fully enjoy the performance of this phone. So the battery capacity here is also at 5000 mAh, which is a decently huge battery, but performance wise I'm getting a much better performance compared to the Redmi Note 12 Pro, and I think it all totally boils down to the processor that this two phone runs. From what I can see here, the 4nm Snapdragon chipset here is much more efficient than the Dimensity 1080 which is seen in the Redmi Note 12 Pro with a 6nm chipset, and the result is actually really drastic. So I've ran my standard YouTube test with max brightness, max resolution of 4K, and started the test at 8 PM at night with 100% battery life, and at the 15-hour mark the POCO has 33% battery life left, and the Redmi at 15 mark hour already hit 8% battery life. The Redmi died at 16.5 hours, but at the same 16.5 hours mark the POCO still has 25% battery life. It went on strong for 19.5 hours and still has 6% battery life, and finally died at 20.5 hours. That is super impressive considering how much juice it squeezed out of the same 5000 mAh battery battery with just a more efficient chipset. The phone here also supports 67 watts turbo charging, and POCO again gives you that 67 watt charger in the box itself, so you don't need to go out and get a separate charger. So the F5 was rumored to have a Qualcomm Snapdragon chipset, and fortunately you get that on this phone. You're not gonna get the best Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 here with this phone, but a humble Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 which uses 4nm architecture, and as we can see from the battery test, the chipset is a beast at managing the power from this phone. The Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 also clocks in at an impressively higher clock speed of 2.91 GHz, which is extremely impressive as compared to its higher tier Redmi counterpart running the Dimensity chipset. So the phone is extremely smooth with my test, and this Snapdragon chipset runs YouTube with 4K with no problems, no lag. And reason I say this is because the Snapdragon 695 on the Redmi Note 11 Pro cannot run 4K on YouTube, which is a bummer. So gaming with this phone is also really smooth, and playing games like PUBG is also great, where you get that nice smooth gameplay even at HDR graphics running in extreme quality. So the only downside with this phone is that you don't get an expandable storage here with it. I hope phone manufacturers don't go down this route, since many big brands like Samsung have already taken away expandable storage in hopes to sell you bigger storage up front. However, phones like the F5, which only comes in 256GB configuration, doesn't really work with this model. So the F5 is also water resistant rated, albeit only at IP53 dust and water resistant. So you're gonna get decent splash protection, but nothing like using it under the rain or accidentally dunking it in the pool. Apart from that, you're also gonna get some technologies like Liquid Cool 2.0, which uses a vapor chamber to help cool down and dissipate heat from the phone. Another newer technology here is also the inclusion of Bluetooth 5.3, which means this phone has the latest and best Bluetooth chipset at the moment. And another good news here, unlike the Redmi Note 12 Pro, you're gonna get MIUI 14 running Android 13 and not Android 12. So following the footstep of most phone manufacturers, you're gonna get a large megapixel sensor here with the F5 as well. And the main camera here is a 64 megapixel f1.79 aperture lens that uses a 1.4 micron pixel, essentially making it more sensitive to light and hence better low light photos. So we're gonna see that performance shortly. And with the 64 megapixel mode selected, you can see that the zooming into a small section of the photo, the camera is actually pretty impressive and sharp. However, when comparing it to the 48 megapixel raw photo on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, the iPhone slightly surpasses it in terms of definition, just very slightly. Speaks a lot for a mid-range phone. Overall, day-to-day shots are very clear and sharp with the POCO, and you're not going to be disappointed with them if you use it as your main device to capture photos. And moving on to the macro lens, it's similar to most of the 2 megapixel macro sensor that we see, and with the macro shots from the POCO, you don't get to focus that closely to the lens, and the images are usable but not as sharp, thanks to that lower resolution macro lens. When comparing to the iPhone, you get to go way closer to the lens, almost touching the lens, and you're still getting a sharp image since the camera is using the iPhone's main 12 megapixel ultra wide camera lens. So the 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide lens is decent, which has a nice field of view that opens up a lot of photography opportunities with this phone. But like most ultra wide lenses, you do lose out in resolution here, and generally most ultra wide shots do not get that fine detail you get with the main wide lens on the phone. I believe portrait mode here is also using the same algorithm as the Redmi that we've checked out previously, which means that sometimes you're gonna get randomly blurred stuff, but that's to be expected, even with the highest tier iPhone 14 Pro Max. So the downside to most of this portrait mode on the POCO or the Redmi is that it all uses the same main camera sensor, so you won't be getting any zooming effect, unlike other phones like the iPhone that lets you select the focal length, which drastically changes the perspective of your photo. So I'm really impressed with what you can extract here with the night mode capabilities, and I can see that it manages to take in quite a lot of details despite photos being captured in almost pitch black. Zooming in, you definitely can't see much detail. However, as a general photo, comparing to not being able to capture photos at all, I think what you have here with the POCO is actually pretty good. Video quality wise, you're gonna get 4K 30 frames per second quality here with the POCO, as well as it goes down to 1080p for 30 and 60 frames per second. The front camera is also 1080p, which shoots up to 60 frames per second. And in terms of slow motion, you're gonna get a maximum of 240 frames per second regardless if you're shooting 1080 or 720p, unlike the Redmi Note 12 Pro, which can go up to 960 frames per second at 720p mode. So this is the test of the POCO F5 4K resolution resolution rear camera, and this is how the quality of the video look like with direct studio light on my face. So I hope everything is clear. So as I turn around, you will see when the light is behind me, this is how the quality of the video look like. I believe you see more noise, and things are not that sharp. But if you turn around and there's ample lighting in front of you, it's pretty good. So this is the quality of the front-facing camera at 1080p. Currently recording at 60 frames per second, but later it'll downgrade to 30 frames per second as I export it. So this is with a lot of light in front of me with studio lighting, although 1080p. And if I turn around and now the light's behind me, you can see my face is a lot darker, it's a lot softer, and there's more noise. But if you have ample lighting, I think even the front-facing camera at 1080p is actually pretty good. So this is the 4K quality of the POCO rear camera. You can see how everything is sharper. This is my keyboard, my monitor. So that's how it looks like with sufficient lighting around. So another good look here into a modern mid-range smartphone from POCO. I think they've created something really great here, especially with the Snapdragon chipset and how that boosted the battery life to be so much better than the Redmi Note 12 Pro. If you're getting a phone for an elderly parent or as a kid starter phone, or you just don't want to break the bank by it and you don't need the latest feature in smartphone from Samsung or Apple, then I think this is a great contender for you to choose from. So that is it for this review. If you find this video helpful, smash the thumbs up button, share this video everywhere, and if you haven't yet subscribed, do consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.